Okay, guys, if you have any questions throughout this presentation today, please drop them in the comments. Your guys' feedback is super important as we go through these webinars. I'm really excited about this topic today. I love doing these webinars because I feel like I learn as we go and it helps me be a better salesman and a better rep for you guys as well. So I hope that if you guys take away anything, even if it's just one piece, I hope that this is a beneficial 30 to 45 minutes for you. So I'm going to share my screen here. And we are going to get this started. Like I said, if you guys do have a technical guide, please make sure that that is handy. If you do not have a technical guide, please just drop that in the comments and Trent will get that shipped out today. So can you guys see this screen here that says Harvest Haven?
I can see it, Molly.
Okay, so if you guys notice, my background is a little different than last week. I do travel back and forth between Washington. So I am actually in South Dakota today. We did get some freezing rain. We did not get the snow like you guys did, but it is an ice skating rink here. So our topic today, let me see if I can, here we go. Okay, so if you don't know who I am, I just want to start this every time just because we do get new people every week. My name is Molly. I am the Harvest Haven brand lead. I do reside in South Dakota. I have two young kiddos, Watson and Navy, and I've been in the agriculture field for about 12 years now. And I've been with Harvest Haven for about a year. So the goal today, we are talking about Alpha Core variety placements. If you look here below, this is actually a picture that one of my dealers sent in this last spring. This is actually a picture of our 4015 alfalfa. And it was cut on May 15th. It was pre-bloom and it was cut early bud stage and it yielded 3 tons per acre. So I really love just seeing product pictures. So if you guys actually have any of our alpha core alfalfa varieties out there, please send me pictures, yield data. That helps us with webinars just like this. So throughout this dealer webinar series, we are working through the technical guide. So if you see up here, last week we covered alfalfa ratings. This week we are covering how to place the right alpha core varieties on the right acre. And then next week we are actually going to be covering our forage grasses. So we're going to just keep deep diving and working our way through this table of contents. And I think it is really important that as we go through this, you guys have these guides. So when you are out working with your growers, you know how to utilize this guide, the information that's in there. So please keep this handy as we work through our topic today. Today we are focusing on placement, but specifically root type. Root type directly correlates to where you need to place that product. So as you see through here, we essentially have 2 different root type products in our portfolio. We have a taproot and we have a branch root. There are actually 4 different types of root structures. And our goal today is to help you guys understand how root architecture drives stand longevity and stress tolerance and placement decisions. So not all alfalfa roots are going to behave the same. And so that's why it's important to understand how these roots are acting, where they are sitting in the soil portfolio, so you guys can put those roots on the right acre. So there's actually 4 different types of root structures. Today we're going to cover 3 just because those are the 3 that you're going to see in our alpha core lineup. The most popular root type that you guys are going to be seeing is a taproot. I would say 75 to 80% of the alfalfa varieties in the market are taproot varieties. Then you guys are going to see a branch root. We do have 1 branch root product in our lineup, and we have a creeping root up here. I put this product in the slides today because for me, living in South Dakota, we see quite a bit of creeping and grazing alfalfa varieties. So if you are in need of something that is strictly being grazed, creeping root products are low bloat and they can handle that traffic. So we're going to keep moving here. So this is actually a article that Trent shared with me yesterday. As we go through building these webinars, Trent and I are actively discussing these topics. We want to make sure that all of this information that we are presenting to you guys is relevant information. And throughout the process of building this webinar series, we came across this article from the Hay and Forage Grower. And so basically what this article is saying, and I'll share this with you after the fact. Trent, maybe if you want to drop the article in the chat, that would be awesome. But what this article is saying that most of the alfalfa plant is found underground with roots growing as much as 5 feet per year and reaching up to 30 feet deep. So it's important to focus on that root system because improving your root system architecture can have a profound impact on plant productivity. So it's like an iceberg. Most of what you don't even see is below the surface. The leafage or the foliage above the surface is just a sliver of what that plant actually has. So roots have the potential to impact nitrogen fixation, nutrient uptake, water use efficiency, plant heaving from frost, winter hardiness, and pest tolerance. So did you just drop that in the
I
chat
dropped it.
there?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so if you guys get a chance to read this article, it is super insightful. It actually talks about, we're going to keep going here. So it actually talks about, so I want to break it down a little bit because it is a pretty dense article. So studying alfalfa roots, we're not seeing a ton of yield advancements in alfalfa because to study that root architecture, it's really difficult because the majority of that plant is underground. And you guys have to do a lot of digging to be able to understand the root mass. So there's a lot of tools that are coming into the market, making that data more easy to collect and more accurate. So what that plant is actually doing, that alfalfa plant develops over half of its roots in the top 10 inches of soil within the first 7 weeks of planting. And they measured, so within this study from that article that I just shared, I can pop back and forth here if you're curious. But within that study, they measured 8.5 miles of roots per square yard, and nearly half of those shallow, fine roots died off by season's end. This natural turnover contributed to roughly 740 pounds of carbon and 54 pounds of nitrogen per acre back into the soil system. So to better understand this, going through back to this chart. So to better understand how root type impacts performance, researchers selected plants and grouped them based on their root structure. So looking here, we have a branch root and we have a tap root. These groups were intercrossed and then evaluated over 2 growing seasons. So if you see here, we've got, hold on, my slide is up here, hide. Okay, so we have our establishment year and we have our first production year here. So the results were really clear. Alfalfa with more fibrous branched root systems yielded 7 to 14% more in the seeding year and 9 to 16% more in the first production year compared to traditional taproot types. These yield advantages held across different soils and varying phosphorus and potassium levels. So your key takeaway here is selecting for improved root architecture, especially fibrous and branched root types, is a promising strategy for boosting alfalfa yield and stand performance. Trent, do you have any input on that as we go through this?
Not at this time.
Okay, so what's the reasoning behind this? And why am I saying this? Because if you guys are just taking this at surface level, you're like, well, then why don't I just put a branch root on every acre, right? Because it's going to yield more in those first 2 seasons. So going back to this article, there's several explanations for higher yields with branch rooted plants, and they found that these plants had more nodules than those with taproots. So this means greater nitrogen fixation. It could also be that branch rooting allows that plant to access more soil nutrients. But in turn, a taproot can store carbohydrates better. And so typically you see those products being quicker to regrow, as well as having higher winter survival and fall dormancy ratings. So there's perks to both of these, but I just wanted to share that because I do think that this is an important part of our topic today in looking at those root structures. So now we're going to deep dive into each root structure. So taproot, if you are looking in our technical guide here, you see that 4015, our top seller, is a taproot. Our 914, 5290, and our 5040 is a taproot product. So this is a single dominant root growing deep into the soil. It has greater access to deep moisture, strong drought tolerance, and it stores a large amount of carbohydrate reserves for regrowth. It is sensitive to compaction, and it needs a well-drained, friable soil. So what you will see with these taproots, and as we move through this, a taproot really struggles if in higher clay soils because it's too compact, and you can actually see that root start to rot if it is placed in the wrong soil type.
I'll just add something on symptomology there. Just you can typically tell when if you're evaluating a stand from the top without digging the roots on taproot products that tend to hit a hard pan or are struggling inside those clay profiles I'm always talking about, will yellow the leaves. So it'll start to yellow and kind of pull back in its overall growth habit. So if you're seeing that, it almost kind of, I think, looks like if you had like a wireworm issue in corn or something where you're basically you're you're interrupting the uptake, the nutrient uptake, and therefore it's transmitting those symptoms to the leaf structure. And so if you start to see larger areas based on kind of soil profiles where you see a lot of yellowing of the leaf on the top, it could just be that you're hitting a hard pan or you're getting something that's shallowing those roots up and it can't get the nutrients it needs. So it's kind of something that if a grower takes you out and you're looking at the field and you're kind of scratching your head, that's typically what those symptoms look like.
Thanks, Trent. I think as we work our way through the agronomics of these root structures, I think it's important to also look at how these roots are uptaking nutrients. And so if you're looking at a taproot, taproots have a superior ability to take nutrients from deep soil structures. So branch root, and we'll deep dive into this a little bit more, but taproots can suck up those nutrients that are really deep in that soil. Taproots access nutrients far below the top soil layer, especially nitrates, sulfur, boron, and moisture stored deeper in the profile. They have a stable uptake during drought, and because taproots chase moisture deeper, nutrient movement continues even through dry spells. They have a consistent nutrient uptake in lighter, sandy, or well-drained soils, and these soils lose nutrients through leaching. The taproot captures what moves downward. Moving on to the branch root. So as you see in these structures, they're shooting all these branches off. So that is allowing that root to capture more nutrients. This taproot splits into multiple primary laterals higher in the profile. So you're seeing this branching in that top 6 to 12, 0 to 6 inches of the soil. It spreads nutrient uptake wider and not as deep. It has better tolerance to surface compaction and variable soil textures. It does have a slightly reduced drought tolerance reach compared to a taproot because that root is in that top 0 to 12 inches. So what's the nutrient difference compared to a taproot? So the branch root does have exceptional access to topsoil nutrient zones. Most fertilizer applications, organic matter, mineralization, and microbial nutrient cycling occurs in the upper profile. So branch roots plants excel, at capturing phosphorus, potassium, and micronutrients influenced by microbial activity. So there is better uptake in heavier soils. In tight clay soils or slow draining soils, nutrients remain near the surface, exactly where that branch root system is dominant. And then it does have a rapid response to surface applied fertilizers and manure. It has high lateral density, which in turn creates faster nutrient interception. So if you're looking at a taproot versus a branch root, that branch root is you're going to see a yield boost in soil applied nutrients, where a taproot is really digging into that soil profile and bringing those nutrients from down below upward into the plant. So how does that in turn help us decide where to place these products? So if you're looking here at our Alpha Core lineup, whether it's on my screen here or in your technical guide, 4015 does have a strong taproot. So the placement on this is well to moderately well drained soils. This is honestly in our lineup, 4015 is our highest yielding product on good irrigated or dry land soils. Our second most sold product is probably our 4044. This is a hybrid branch taproot. I would say it is more of a branch root than a taproot. You place this product on moderately to somewhat poorly drained soils. Its best placement is for wet, heavy soils. So if you have mucky ground, anything that is going to hold that water, that is where this 4044 needs to be placed. 914 is, I think Steve sells the crap out of 914. I think that this product is a really good product if you're looking for cost efficiency. It is predominantly taproot, so our 914 is a mixture of all of our alfalfa varieties and put into one product. So it is a cheaper product, but it still is a good quality product. I would place this on the same acres as our 4015. You're going to see max tonnage on those better acres. Our 5290, we don't move a lot of this, but I would not count this product out. In our alfalfa breeders, there are more and more products coming down the line, and then this is going to be a variety that is going to continue to improve. So I do encourage you guys to get some of this product out in your field and compare it to your 4015 on those acres. This is a strong tap-rooted product. The best soil types to place it on is very well to excessively well drained soils, just like the 4015. It is a very persistent variety. It probably in our lineup has the longest stand life, and it is pretty traffic tolerant. And then our 5040, it is a strong taproot. Same placement as the 4015, the 9914, but this one does have potato leaf hopper resistant in it. Any questions on that? Any comments, Trent or Steve?
One thing that I would add in differentiating between 5290 and 4015 is the grower themselves. And so we all have growers we work with that maybe are just, they want a little bit of alfalfa, they want it to be there for a long time, but they're not an over manager of it. So they just got a few 4-H cows, or they're just, it's not a dairy. It's not somebody who's just super involved with the alfalfa side. Maybe they're more corn and soybeans. Alfalfa is kind of an afterthought. 5290 is a very durable product that has a lot of data behind it to stretch it to a 5 to 7 year type product. And so if you have a guy that's just not really involved in the management, 5290 is just what I would consider a true workhorse type product. And so low management environments doesn't really seem to affect it, but it will be there for a very long time. 4015 is more, if you have somebody who's really trying to be on a 28, 30-day cycle, they're more cow oriented than they are row crop oriented. Like those type of guys is where 4015, I think, probably outshines 5290, where they have somebody who understands alfalfa at a higher level, maybe, and just wants to manage it at a higher level. So that's between those two products, they're very similar. They're very similar in regrowth. They're very similar in tonnage, but 5290 is there for the guy that needs something to stretch 6 to 8 years, before he really gets it tore up and goes somewhere else with it. So that's how I differentiate those products.
Trent, do you mind explaining the leaf hopper agronomics and what
Yeah,
that plant
sure.
actually has
Yeah,
that
so leaf
differentiates?
hopper is a really interesting over marketed trait. So leaf hopper is a recessive gene expression. And so it's not a CRISPR type technology. It's not something where they're messing with the genome um, from a lab perspective. It's not a BT trait. It's nothing like that. Leaf hopper, all that is products that are designated leaf hopper have fine hairs. Maybe I'll turn my is my video on? I don't know. Maybe I'm
Your
just talking.
video is on, yep.
Um, so it has little fine hairs that exist up and down the stem and on the ligule that goes out to the leaf. And what those little hairs, microscopic hairs, do is when the leaf hopper bounces onto the plant, those little hairs tickle its belly. It's uncomfortable. And so what happens is then it bounces off of there. And so it's really a push the leaf hoppers
Can you
out
see
of
that
the
there?
field strategy more than it is something that's, that leaf hopper bites the plant and then it messes with its gut and kills it. It's not that type of technology. The problem with leafhopper traditionally has been, from the breeding perspective, is that it is a recessive trait. So I would equate that to Peking and soybeans, in that it's a hard trait to work with. It's a hard trait to get it to express it consistently. And so you shrink up the germplasm pool. And so our advice has typically and traditionally been to the people we work with, that if you go with a genetics first approach, so I take a product like 4015 and I'm okay with spraying insecticide for leaf hoppers to mitigate my leaf hopper risk. That will always, over the life of the stand, typically end up with more tonnage than a leaf hopper product. I say that with a asterisk because leaf hopper in our 5040, for example, is a very, very, very good product to leaf hoppers that are in the market. So I don't know how much more you want me to go with that, Molly, but essentially,
That's great.
the key takeaways are just what that trait is, what it actually does, how that affects the leaf hopper in the field, but also understand that you are pulling from a very limited pool of genetics because of how hard that trait expresses itself and how hard it is to work with that trait. So that's kind of, I guess, my story on leafhopper, if that satisfies you.
Yeah, and actually, in the products in our lineup, we are going to be seeing genetic enhancements on the 5290 and the 5040. The 5040 is put in Wisconsin trials against a broad range of leafhoppers, and ours was one of the top two. So I do have confidence in that variety, but like Trent said, by spraying insecticide, if you choose your genetics first, that's going to pay in the long run. So.
I just think it's important. I've harped on this twice. Like, you got to size that grower up to what his management style is and how much attention he's going to pay to alfalfa. Because you have guys on opposite ends of that spectrum. And 5040 is very much an insurance type product for a guy that wants to put out 12 acres and kind of forget about it. and just go cut it whenever he wants. He doesn't want another headache. He doesn't want to have to worry about leaf hoppers. Like it's just an insurance policy there.
Yeah, where 4015 is more of an aggressive manager. I think you can push the cuttings, push the tonnage. Um, it is probably our number one product in our lineup. So Bernie last week, so if you were on our webinar last week, Bernie had a question for us on stem thickness factors and what the stem thickness was based on the variety, because he noticed that 4015 actually dries down quicker than the 914. So I wanted to move into that just a little bit. Is there any questions on the root structure placement of our products before I kind of pivot here a little bit? All right, Bernie, this is for you. Okay, so stem thickness factors, these are ranked by the weight that they carry in the stem thickness. So the number one factor in stem thickness is going to be genetics. So that is the biggest driver by far. The second factor in the stem thickness is your plant maturity at cutting. So early bud means thinner stems, full bloom or later. The longer you leave that plant out there, the thicker those stems are going to be. So if you guys are trying to push those cuts and wanting that product to dry down a little bit, cutting it a little bit sooner is going to help those stems be a little bit thinner and not as stocky. The third driver is stand age and plant density. So year one, our seeding year, typically you have thinner stands. As that stand develops and gets some age on it, you're going to see thicker stems because that crown is getting thicker, that root is getting more established. So thin stands in turn goes to thicker individual stems, so more room and more reserve. So if you're looking at corn population, on my side, if you're looking at a sorghum sedan grass or forage sorghum, the higher the population, the thinner the stalks, the lower the population, the thicker the stalks, because there's more reserves. There's more room for that plant to grow. So I know Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, Steve, but when you are recommending people to seed alfalfa, you're typically recommending 25 to 30 pounds. Is that correct? Pushing that seeding rate?
Yeah, I believe in the higher seeding rate because it does a good job that first year of choking out competition, and you also get a finer stem. But that's just me.
Yeah, and there is data to back that. If you are seeding your alfalfa with grass, you are going to see thicker stems, and you're going to maybe see a little bit more of a dry down time. Number 4, potassium is a big factor. So high soil K or heavy manure ground, you're gonna have noticeably thicker, sturdier stems. Low K, you're gonna have weak, spindly stems, even in good varieties. And this is something on the next couple slides, we're gonna talk about nutrient management in alfalfa because I do think it's important as we look at placing these varieties, looking at the root type, making sure that we are doing everything in our power to make sure that that stand has longevity and persistence. Water stress, drought tolerance, moderate drought stress during stem elongation equals thicker, shorter stems. Over irrigation or lush grow equals taller, thinner stems. And then your fall dormancy. So a more non-dormant, so the 8 to 10, which we don't have any of those in our lineup. You're going to see coarser stems, very dormant. So this is our lineup, our 1 to 3. You're going to have naturally finer stems. And I did actually contact our alfalfa breeder. So this was really interesting. And Bernie, with your question last week, you said that the 4015 dried down better than the 914. The 4015 does have a thicker stem, but I would wonder when that plant was cut. And maybe that 4015 was managed a little bit more than the 914. Do you have any feedback on that, Bernie? Or if anyone has any feedback on stem thickness or dry down times for any of these products. You can always leave it in the chat box. So we'll just keep going. I just thought that was very interesting. So if you are looking at dry down times and you are trying to manage those cuttings, these are all the factors that go into that. And I think one of the bigger things would be when you are cutting that plant. This was another comment we had last week was nutrient removal needs based on tonnage that you're taking off. I do feel like growers manage that alfalfa stand when you're seeding it. They're probably putting nutrients out there right away when you're seeding it. But I think it's really important to think about one, the root structures, but two, what our goal is and how can we increase the stand persistent and longevity of that. And I think it's really important to look at the nutrient needs of alfalfa. So if you're consistently taking 3 tons off of that acre, what is that actually removing from your ground? What is that doing to your plant structure? So number one, potassium is the most important nutrient in alfalfa. And actually, as Trent and I have conversations about this, he had his Whiffles rep in there yesterday, and they were talking about how important potassium is to stalk strength. I look at it from a forage side. Anytime we're talking about standability of oats, and especially a forage oat that gets taller, I always recommend putting potassium out there because that is going to increase your stalk strength. So in turn, on the alfalfa side of things, potassium is super important in increasing that stand longevity and increasing that stem strength, in turn going back down to that crown too. Phosphorus is our number 2 important nutrient. So phosphorus helps with faster regrowth, root mass, nodulation, and energy transfer. Number 3 would be sulfur. Sulfur is going to help with the protein quality of that plant, nodule function, and new growth as well. And then there's boron and magnesium. But the 2 that I really wanted to focus on, number 1, potassium is very important, and 2, phosphorus. Let's see, that may be the end of my slides, but Trent and I have been working on this last week for you guys. This was a question we had in our webinar last week, is if there was a tool that you guys could use to help you in having these conversations with your growers, the nutrient removal by ton. So can you still see this here? Do I need to zoom in, or is that all right for you guys?
Can I add one thing, Molly?
Go ahead.
Your alfalfa that you're growing is basically a legume like a soybean. And if you think about one crop of soybeans a year and the amount of fertility we use, and then you think about alfalfa, which you're going to take 3 on the bottom side and 4 plus cuttings off and have regrowth, that's how important your nutrient levels are. And you're looking at similar nutrients with both products, but a lot of people put alfalfa out there and they just forget it. So it needs to be treated just as well or better than a soybean, in my opinion.
For sure. I totally agree with that. I've actually always heard how hard alfalfa is on your ground. And I truthfully think the only reason that is because people just want to put it out there and leave it. And then when you get to your next crop, so if it's in 5 years and you get to a place where you're putting corn in, your corn really struggles because every ton that you take off, you're removing those nutrients. So this is a tool that Trent and I are heavily working on. We want to get it to a place where it is super easy for you guys to use and understand. But essentially what you're seeing here is per ton of alfalfa that you're taking off, you are taking off 51 pounds of N. So if you were taking off 3 tons per acre, let's say you're doing 4 cuttings a year. Trent, do that math for me. 150 times 4. Let's just say 600 pounds of alfalfa. I don't know if that's accurate. How close am I, Trent? You're muted. Okay, so
Yeah,
let's
you're
just say
close.
you're taking off 600 pounds of actual N off that acre. So N and nitrogen and potassium are the biggest users on that product. I'm not telling you to put nitrogen on your acres because that plant's a legumes, right? So it's fixing nodules. If you put nitrogen on those acres, you are going to, if you over apply it or if you have an abundance, you're not going to see that nitrogen fixation on the roots itself. So, I would say phosphorus and potassium being the most important, you're using 49 pounds of actual N per ton of product that you guys are removing. So this is really insightful. And actually, when Trent and I were building this yesterday, he was like, gosh, that seems like a lot of fertilizer. And it's like, yeah, it is. You don't have to, but it's just important to know how much nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur is getting taken off of that acre and what the potassium is actually doing for the plant. So if you're completely removing those nutrients from your soil by year 2, year 3, you're going to see in turn a lesser stand longevity. So you maybe will only be able to take that to 4 or 5, where if you are managing those nutrient levels, you may be able to increase that stand longevity by a year or 2.
So our goal here is to create this is all just back end stuff that we're working through the math and making sure it works. But at some point that we'll have kind of a Excel file here for you where you can type in if you know the total tons that are removed, and it gives you a fertilizer recommendation based on analysis in pounds per acre. The other way that I think guys come in is they say, well, I got 3 bales off that, average 3 bales an acre on 22 acres or something like this. Okay, well, how much is your bale weight roughly? And how many total bales did you get? How many acres? And then it can back figure that. So it's kind of going to be two pronged. If you know the total tons, that's fine. If not, if a guy's just kind of giving you bales, all you have to do is kind of know the average bale weight and you can get the output. We're also open to any suggestions that you would like, but essentially what we would like to have happen as an actionable is you could print something at the end of the day that they could take to the co-op or take to wherever their fertilizer person is and say, here's what I need. And then they can work through that conversation with the co-op to make it practical, but still kind of have what they need from a removal perspective. The other thing is hopefully this will be a tool if you do sell fertilizer that you can navigate a grower through to explain to them the importance of fertilizer in their alfalfa crop, and hopefully that'll be a upsell for you at your retail location. So that's kind of the idea behind this. If there's any ideas or things that you would like to see or make it make sense from just a retail mindset, we're happy to try to build that out as we're going. So, and then hopefully at some point we can get this to a digital place where it's a little bit more accessible, maybe on the website or something, but that's going to be a little bit down the road.
Yeah. This is something we started yesterday at probably 4 o'clock. And it takes a little bit of Trent and myself working through this. But last week we did have some feedback of nutrient removal by ton. So stay tuned for that. We're pretty excited about this. I think it'll be, like Trent said, a really useful tool for you guys as you're having conversations with their growers. And, if you guys are selling fertilizer as well. So we will make that. Let's see. Okay, what? Hold on. I struggle seeing these chats. So I'm not sure who this is, but I really don't think anyone can afford to replace removal rates. Most growers just apply once a year what they can afford. Do you recommend a better timing of the application? So personally, I do think, and this is important looking at those root types too. So looking at a branch root product versus a taproot product, a branch root is going to, you're going to see more reaction if you're putting on dry fertilizer or liquid over top right away. If you were going to apply fertilizer, I recommend in the spring when that ground's still frozen. Honestly, is a perfect time to do that. So as that plant starts to regrow, so if you remember last week, we talked about ratings. Essentially, that plant goes into dormancy and it's using up all of its storage, the carbohydrates, the sugars. So in the spring, we're running on those reserves still. So if you can put that fertilizer out there in the spring, when that plant runs out of reserves, it's going to hit those nutrient levels, and then that in turn is going to help the plant. So I definitely recommend a spring fertilizer application. Trent, are you on the same page as that?
Yeah, I mean, it's the best time to fertilize an existing stand, in my opinion, is typically after the first cutting or prior to the first cutting, right? And so if you can hit that spring window with fertilizer or that late spring window with fertilizer, that's probably where you're going to see your biggest return. I do want to say that sulfur is a component that's very important in alfalfa production, and so some portion of your blend coming from ammonium sulfate is ideal. And so because of that, that's more of a springtime. If you're getting into the fall, I don't think sulfur's near as good a bang for your buck. I don't think there's probably much argument on that. But if you are doing a spring application, I would highly recommend a portion of that coming from ammonium sulfate so you can get that sulfur portion. But again, we're not a fertilizer company. We're not pretending to be. I don't really understand the economics of, can anybody afford it? Can they not afford it? Those are conversations you guys definitely can navigate. All we want to do is give you a tool that gives you an idea, that gives, at some level, helps you navigate those conversations and be a resource for your growers. So use it however you want. But I don't disagree with you. I don't know if anybody can afford removal rates in today's economy anyways on anything. So, but we do it. And so how much you do it, and we just want to be a part of the conversation and create something that gives you a way to walk him through that conversation. So that's all.
Yeah, I think it's important. We don't sell fertilizer, but as we have these conversations about alfalfa placements, stand longevity, persistence, this is a factor in that. So I think it's really important that we note we don't sell fertilizer. I worked in fertilizer for 10 years, but I have enough to be dangerous. But definitely, work with, if you don't sell fertilizer, work with somebody that knows more about it. But it is important to increase your stand longevity. So is there any other questions? That's pretty much what I have for you guys today. These questions are awesome. Your feedback is super important for us as we go through these webinars. We want to be able to take something and create tools for you guys to help you better serve your growers, to help build rapport with your growers. So if you have any other questions, we really, really appreciate it. Or feedback. I will say next week we are going to start covering individual components of forage grasses. And then the next week we will cover our forage grass mixes and placement management tools for that. So if you guys are around next Friday, let's see, next Friday is not Christmas yet, is it? So next Friday, the 19th, we will cover individual components of forage grasses. And then we will not be having a webinar on the 26th. We will regroup after the first of the year. So we really appreciate you guys as partners. You guys are the core of our business. Your feedback is so important. So if you guys get a chance to fill out the feedback form that was sent out in our November and December newsletter, that would be so great. We are giving away a $100 gift card to someone that fills that out. Like I said, that helps us better serve you guys. If you guys do need technical guides, please let us know. We can get those in the mail. And then I'll put a plug in here today. If you guys ever want one of these signs, this was something we started probably 2 years ago, I feel like. So some of you guys that have been dealers for a while, you maybe don't have one of these signs, but this is a heavy metal sign. So if you guys are in a position where you want to promote that you guys do carry alfalfa and cover crops, please let us know. We would love to put one of these on a pallet for you guys and send it over to your location. So if we don't have any questions, I appreciate you guys all for jumping on. Last week I recorded and then I didn't export the file correctly. So I hope to do better on that this week so you guys can see this recording and this slideshow in your email. But otherwise, thank you guys for hopping on, and that is all we have for you today.
Thanks, Molly.